Hey everybody, it's Gina Nelson, Director of Counseling, and I am actually presenting today with my hockey mom hoodie and messy bun, kind of on purpose. And I just want to share as a way to role model taking care of ourselves that I had on my professional clothing for the morning to see my students, be in my meetings. I was really uncomfortable and telling myself that I needed to stay in that clothing so that I could record this video, and then realized that that was absolutely ridiculous and there was no need to do that. And so I'm feeling much more comfortable in clothes that don't hurt my skin, and my messy bun to keep my hair out of my face and away from my neck, which sometimes is very uncomfortable for me, as a way to show that this is a time to just be genuine, and there are definitely times to be a little more professionally dressed, at least in the way the camera can see us, but it's okay to be genuine too, especially with each other. So, having said that, I'm presenting today on vicarious trauma, and I've heard a lot of faculty and staff say things like this: I can't stop thinking about the stories that I'm hearing, can't stop thinking about students and what they're going through and how hard it is to teach, given all that they're experiencing. So I thought I would put together a quick presentation about that specifically. And so how does this happen? How does this vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, whatever you want to call it, happen? I like this version from the ACA of the cost of caring, that it doesn't have to be a crisis like this. It could be stories that you're hearing anytime from your students about abusive relationships, sexual assault, trauma from their childhood, things that I know a lot of you have heard when we were still in person with our students, that hearing all of that pain, that trauma, as we listen to the person and we care about them, it sticks to us. And the more empathetic you are as a person naturally, the stronger that gift is for you, then the more it's going to stick, and the more it can hurt. Also, if you've experienced a similar type of trauma as the person you're talking to, even if you feel like you've healed from that trauma, it can be really challenging to hear that come up for somebody else, and being able to really relate to somebody pretty deeply about an experience can make it even harder to let go, even if it's their experience you can't let go. And so what is it? So this is kind of, as this site says, the residual exposure that their definition says counselors, and so since I was citing, I left that in there, but in your case, faculty or staff have from working with people who are going through trauma. And so certainly as counselors, we go through this every day, and you learn how to detach from that, which can be really hard for new counselors. So as a supervisor, I've watched people go through that, and it's not something you can specifically teach, but you can help people through. And so this is from that article, When Students Are Traumatized, Teachers Are Too, and there's a link there. So feel free to click on that. It is a K through 12 article, but everything is relevant to us at Red. So these are some signs to watch for if you think you might have some of the secondary trauma, or you're just not really sure what's happening for you, but something really feels off. Feeling numb or detached, or the opposite, feeling completely overwhelmed by emotions, and that helplessness feeling is very normal at all times, even if it isn't a secondary trauma reaction. I know for myself, it can be the kind of numbness, detached feeling. I think for a lot of counselors, that's a pretty normal reaction when we've heard trauma is to detach. That's how we continue to be able to take on more and more stories. But we're trained for this, and it's a little bit different for therapists. And so, know that for faculty and staff, that can be a warning sign. So pay attention to that. Physically, just feeling exhausted, overwhelmed physically, tired, low motivation, low energy. Behavioral, maybe even avoiding some of the students avoiding certain things that remind you of their stories. Trying to think of it, a good example, if somebody, I keep going back to this example that I feel like I'm starting to get secondary trauma from hearing it from a faculty who heard it from a student, someone living outside a hospital. If you start avoiding news articles that have to do with the hospitals, that would be an example of avoidance. So changing your routine, starting in negative coping mechanisms, drinking, self-harm, drug use, isolating, things like that. Professionally, just not getting your stuff done, not caring about your job anymore, not wanting to check your email, to talk to students or certain students would be a sign. Spiritual, I kind of think of our QPR training of maybe losing interest in your religion, or sometimes gaining interest in religion of, is there a God out there? Why is this happening to our entire world, to these specific students that I'm working with? Or I'm not really sure that my God is out there anymore because this is just too terrible to comprehend. So cognitively feeling confused, not being able to focus, not being able to make decisions, picturing the trauma over and over based on the story that you've been told or the visualization you have based on the words that you've heard. That's like re-experiencing the trauma, which is very common for a trauma survivor and a trauma victim. And so it's really no different for secondary trauma, except often the visuals we've created are our own visuals because we weren't there to experience it firsthand. Often those visuals can be worse than the reality for the person describing it. And interpersonally, withdrawing, being emotionally unavailable for your family, your children, your coworkers, and your friends. Certainly there are a lot of reasons right now and in life in general to have a lot of these symptoms. So don't diagnose yourself if you don't feel like you have secondary trauma. But if you're feeling or noticing any of these signs in yourself or in your friends, colleagues, it's a good idea to check in with yourself or with someone else and determine what's going on for you. So how do you cope with this? Going straight to the how do I deal with this part. I've got 4 quick slides about this: self-care, boundaries, peer support, and locus of control. So self-care, we're going to go way back to Maslow, his hierarchy of needs, because we're really on the bottom of this triangle again. Our basic needs, there are a lot of these triangles you can find if you Google it or in your psych books. I tried to pick a really basic, simple one to make it easiest to understand for everybody. But our basic needs are food, water, warmth, and rest. And I guarantee that the majority of our faculty and staff are not even getting that right now. Adjusting to the new online system, working from home and trying to raise family, take care of ourselves, partners, pets, sometimes being completely alone. Some of these basic needs go by the wayside, especially the water and the food and the rest. And then you can see that above that is safety. We think of safety as the most basic need we have, but if we aren't getting the food and water and enough heat for our bodies and enough rest for our bodies, safety doesn't mean anything. And so the safety and security is what a lot of our world is missing right now with this virus. And so just looking at the types of self-care that we need to focus on first: sleeping, eating, hydrating, resting, listening to our bodies, getting fresh air. That has to happen before we can do anything. So before we work on friendships, before we work on teaching, before we can feel accomplished, definitely before we can live to our potential. So when we say self-care, we mean way down at the bottom of the pyramid. And those are things that we can all do. Personal boundaries. I really encourage faculty and staff to get back to the boundaries that you always used when we were in person. If you would go home home and not check your email after 8 p.m., then why are you doing it now? If you wouldn't check it on the weekends, why are you doing it now? Just because our students are online doesn't mean that we have to be more than ever. We're definitely not going to be online as much as our students are. We might be online more than we usually are, but it should not be to the extreme of making sure to answer every email from a student as soon as it comes in. So when you feel tempted to do that, to get online and check one of the platforms that you're using with your students, try to get up and do something else first. If it's been within an hour, you've just checked it, nothing urgent is going to come over email or Teams. If somebody has a real crisis, if a student is in crisis, they're probably not going to put it in one of these platforms. They might contact you if they have your phone number. Hopefully, if they have a counselor, they're contacting that person. They're using some of the resources like Reach Out. If you have a student you're worried about, encourage them to put like an urgent notification or put their subject in caps when they email you so that you can scan without reading and just see there's nothing urgent and then close it for the day. And I really encourage you, if you do have students that are struggling, to have them use the resources. There are resources on campus. You know, I keep trying to tell people in every meeting that the counseling center is doing business as usual. Have them email us. If you wouldn't handle a situation that a student is talking to you about in the old days, what's causing you to do it now? If they don't want to reach out to us, there's Reach Out, there's lots of things online, there's online counseling all across the nation. There's so many things on our website right now that students can be using as well. So keep your boundaries about counselor versus faculty staff as well. If you've given your cell phone to students, which I'm hearing a lot of faculty and staff typically do or have done now, tell them what the boundaries are around that. At what point are you going to shut it off? At what point are you going to answer? Under which circumstances should they not call you? Like if they are in crisis, maybe you want those calls, maybe you don't want those calls. Do not open it up so that you're available anytime that someone needs you for any reason. That might feel really good in the moment, but students are going to assume that you mean that, and they're going to use those recommendations. And even if it's one student, especially if it's more than one student, that's going to become too much. And then you may get burnt out and want to set boundaries, and students aren't going to understand why. And then it will feel like a personal insult that they've been a burden or that you can't handle them or whatever their depression or trauma history is telling them is not true. So setting boundaries early and setting them for everybody. Okay, so don't assume that they know what they are. If you feel like you've gotten to that point and you need to step back now, there's no bad time to send a general message to all of your students to say, hey, as we continue to navigate this on week 4, I'm realizing that this is what I need to do for myself. Therefore, this is how I'm utilizing self-care. From this hour to that hour, my phone will be off, you know, whatever they are for you. Don't be afraid to use email away messages, especially if you're taking a day off, half a day off. It's break right now. Yes, I'm breaking my own self-care rule, but putting up an away message so that anyone that emails you, anybody on campus or your students, to say, I'm not checking right now, so that if they are struggling with something, 1, they're not expecting an answer, and 2, if it's mental health related, that they know to reach out to somebody else. I've recently started using the Do Not Disturb on my phone, and I can't believe that I never used it before. With the iPhone, I don't know much about a lot of other phones anymore, but on the iPhone, using the Do Not Disturb, you can schedule it so it comes on, or you can just tap the little half moon so that it comes on in the moment. But what I've done personally is put anybody that might need to reach me after hours in my favorites phone list and enabled the Do Not Disturb so that people on my favorites list can call me. And so all my staff, the general campus number, University of Police, Res Life, RDs, any of the people that as the director might need to call me for an emergency at any hour, they're on my list so that they can call me. But nobody's texting me, asking me for anything. If my staff is having those really awesome conversations with hilarious memes and I'm trying to sleep, I'm not feeling annoyed because I keep getting woken up by the ding. So things like that can be very, very useful. I love this meme. I use it way too much, actually, because it's just totally happens in the office, except the students don't have our cell phone numbers. So peer support. It's really important to count on each other right now because others around us are going through the exact same thing, but no two people are feeling the exact same way. And so it's pretty rare to have a worldwide crisis like this where we're all experiencing the same things as our students, but we're still expected to perform at a certain level and take care of them when the same chaos is happening to us. And so create video dates. I did that with a couple of colleagues. It was great to just be human, not put makeup on, and just like talk about anything that was happening for us. Use the educational support groups that we're creating in the College Counseling Center. After tomorrow, we'll have some dates of just open kind of debrief, show up, here's the link, anybody can show up if they want. Just a chance for people to talk and share with a counseling mediator happening to help explain, validate, answer questions, things like that. Also remember the opportunity to talk one-on-one with one of our counseling staff as a faculty member, just to kind of get regrounded if you need that. Exchange information with your colleagues. It can be videos, it could be articles. I'm sure you guys do that usually, especially as faculty. On the staff side, we do it all the time. But another thing that I'm finding is really helpful is the funny memes, the GIFs. Sometimes I'll have my mom and sister like tears rolling down their eyes with GIFs because that's not really their world. They're not in higher ed, and it's just feels really good to me to hear that they're laughing uncontrollably on the other side of Messenger. So send that meme of the greyhound wearing socks. Your coworkers might appreciate that. And then ask for support. Maybe you've hesitated to reach out and ask in the past, but there's nothing like a crisis to make it feel like it's okay to finally do so. And if you're in a pretty good place, then offer support. Let people know, let your inner circle know, or your colleagues know of like, hey, I feel like I'm doing okay the last couple of days. So if anybody needs something, let me know. I'd like to help. And then if something shifts for me, then I'll definitely let you know as well. So locus of control, I've mentioned that in a couple of meetings, and this is what we're focusing on with a lot of our students of what do you have control over? And I put a link there you can click on to get the definition. And I'm working with the psychological definition. There are a lot of different types of locus of control, a lot of math and science ones and physics ones, as you can imagine. So what can I control this week, is where I'm really going with a lot of the people that I work with. Creating a plan and having a goal is really important. If we don't have a goal, then we don't know what we're even getting out of bed for, and we're working towards through the day. And if a week seems like too much, then break it down. What can I do today? I'm feeling extremely overwhelmed. Let me just figure out what I can do this hour. Or if someone's in the middle of a panic attack or coming down from one, or just really in a really frightening place for themselves, just focus minute to minute. Like this minute, I need to sit at the computer. I need to take some deep breaths. I need to go outside and go for a walk. Like what needs to happen right now. And so that's a way to focus on yourself and to help somebody out. So I put together some of the resources that I use for this presentation here so that you can click on them directly. I don't pretend to be an expert on any given subject. These are things that I've learned through my profession and can speak about and use in my practices with students and other people. But I've been trying to research things like this related to COVID specifically, because this kind of crisis changes how we deal with everything. So please feel free to click on these links. Really try to give some of the breathing, meditation, and yoga stuff a shot, even if you don't think that's your thing. I guarantee that even just a couple minutes of deep breathing can really help clear your mind and help you focus a little bit more. Definitely wanted to put up some crisis information, and I put up what we use as our definition of crisis, just as a way to help educate for when we're back in person, because it's hard to know when you're working with students or other colleagues, is this a crisis that warrants like immediate care? Or is this that they're struggling through something and they're upset and they're crying? And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. So I thought I'd take advantage of this and help educate the campus as well. But there are some 24/7 options, of course. Remember not to go into the ER, but to call the ER or urgent care. But then some of these other resources, anytime that you're feeling stressed, you don't have to be in what you feel is a crisis or acute crisis, just needing some support. Or if you are feeling like in crisis, you can call these too. So trying to find some options for different types of population, like our Native American population, LGBTQ population with the Trevor Project, people that would prefer to text rather than call, and of course the suicide hotlines. And if you go to the suicide prevention website, you'll see that they have a lot of options for different populations, such as veterans, LGBTQ, African American, Latino, Latina, and things like that. So I encourage you to search through some of those sites and find something that really speaks to you and works for you. Thank you again for tuning in. I look forward to the next video. If you have ideas of what would be helpful, please shoot me an email and let me know. Have a great day.